Hello, hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to the show. I'm Evelina, multi-passionate creative designer and founder of My Dear Design Studio. And like every week, we're back today with another beautiful, exciting, and very expansive episode with today's guest, Anna Núñez. I'm very pumped about this one because Anna is someone who I have been following and just has been in my orbit for a few years. Just through the digital space, through Instagram, through Pinterest, her email newsletters, whatever it may be, but we never actually got a chance to connect. So Anna is the first guest in the history of the show with whom I got the pleasure of actually meeting at the time of our recording. And just to give context on who Anna is and really the extent of this beautiful dialogue that we have on the show today. Anna is a local painter in St. Petersburg, Florida. Well, I say local as if I'm there. I wish I was in St. Petersburg, but local painter. If you are a St. Petersburg resident in Florida, that little city is very near and dear to my heart. But Anna is someone who, like I mentioned, I have been following for a bit, and I truthfully don't even remember. I forget if we even touch on in the dialogue of how we came to connect or how I came to essentially find her before I had reached out to her, of course, to be on the show. But I believe it was maybe like a Pinterest post or some sort of sponsored Instagram, not sponsored, but you know those posts that like come up now of like recommended or suggested person or something. And I think it was just like a follow, and spontaneously she would pop up on my feed and I would poke around and check in. And I always, from the very beginning, since following her, so appreciated her aesthetic. If you guys know me, or if you don't, you could probably guess that beauty is an utmost value from the content on my Instagram feed, from just like photos that I'm sharing. I value some nice, pretty things, whether it's interior decor and space from my architecture background or just like a really beautiful piece of art. When I saw Anna's feed, when I saw the work that she was creating, I was instantly like, okay, yes, she has taste, love her vibe, just going to stay in the loop and all that. And that was really it. She was just one of those people that, would occasionally inspire me with her beautiful share and post. And I had subscribed to her newsletter and I would get those here and there and be like, yeah, like I appreciate what she's doing here. And then it was a couple months ago. I mean, really, if I'm looking back now at the launch of this podcast episode now in April, this was probably shortly after the new year when I was getting the inspiration to kickstart this season and feeling very lost in my uncertainty of what the heck am I doing with my life and my career and like, go back to episode 1, you guys, because I spill all the beans there of like the distress that I was navigating. But it was during this time in January that I was on Pinterest and I see one of Anna's posts or articles or something related to her come up. And there was this article that she was featured in a publication, and I read it, and kid you not, you guys, I finished reading this article and I was brought to tears, literally just so emotionally stirred because her journey and her life story that she shared in this article so resonated with me that I felt like this is like a sign from God of telling me I need to pursue the path that Anna took. And for more context, Anna followed a graphic design career. She started her own studio similar to what I'm doing with Studio Domka, but transitioned into doing full-time art, into painting. And if you guys know me and have followed my work for a bit, you might remember or know that I will occasionally post my art practice when I'm called, when I'm inspired. And it's been a while since I have, as I haven't really felt the nudge or the pull to go that route. But there have been seasons where I was just so invested in my mixed media collage or my card making. I mean, Studio Domka started out with me quite literally making cards. And amidst all the digital design work that I do that I love so much, tangible handmade art is just, it just hits different. You're working with your hands, you get out of your head. It's so intuitive. It's such a beautiful practice for me to connect with just presence. If I really zoom out and distill it to its essence, it allows me to be so still and just in the most beautiful flow state. And it's always that part of me too that I wonder, like, it's still, there's just this like open-ended question of like, will I ever pursue art full time? It's like, just, yeah, like a question mark. I love my art. And the thought of doing full-time artistry, whether it's painting or, again, I tried to do that with my handmade cards years ago. But it's always just kind of lingered for me. And there was something about reading Anna's article where she talks about her decision to switch from graphic design, branding, into full-time art and what that meant for her, how that impacted her life, why it was so important for her to do that, because she was honoring a part of herself, the younger version of herself who grew up wanting to be an artist in that maybe more tactical way. And oh yeah, just that and so much more that was said. I'm like, oh my gosh. Again, thinking like I need to pursue my art full time, but whatever that open-ended question mark is, and amidst all the emotions that I was feeling, I felt the nudge. And you guys know I've talked about the nudge here on the show a few times. And in my newsletters I've been sharing especially, it's like when you get that intuitive hit of like, do that thing, reach out to that person. That is exactly what I felt with Anna, to contact her and connect with her. And at the time I didn't necessarily know if it was going to be, via this podcast, because it was still such an early idea that I was formulating, really sitting with this theme of change and transitions that has now evolved to be this show. With so many more episodes, forthcoming episodes to come. But I just sent her a cold email. I was like, hey, like I've been following your work for a few years. I read your article on a whim and I was so inspired and so moved. And I'd love to have a deeper conversation with you about this if you're open. And she was like, yeah, let me think about it. I'll check out your work. And then she came back and said, yeah, let's do it. And so we did it. And oh man, I mean, I'm reflecting on this recording right now as I record this intro, and I always feel like a high when I get off of conversations with my guests. And this one moved me so much because maybe it hit that chord personally of like talking about this topic that was so near and dear to me. That is art, that is graphic design. And not to say by any means that you have to be an artist or a graphic designer or a business owner to listen to this conversation, because what we touch on goes so much more beyond that. But especially if you are someone who channels creativity in whatever mediums, whether, it is through some sort of tangible art or digital art or writing or speaking, we talk about everyone being a creative in their own unique, beautiful ways in this conversation so much. And I feel like so much of what we get into can be so easily applied to every facet of life, whether it's in relationships or, your corporate job setting, like whatever that is. There's so much that we really unearth here. But yeah, this one really left me stirred. And I think, as I shared in my first episode of the season, there's been this part of me too that has been just really coming to connect with my faith in a way that feels so expansive and exciting, but also confusing and conflicting as, I've ventured down many paths in my life and have been through so many, I'll just say, explored so many curiosities in trying to understand like the meaning of life. In addition to coming to understand myself with my personal development journey and working with so many mentors and like coaches and all that. And ultimately, like, my faith is just really coming down to Jesus, you guys. Like, it's just so pure and like essential. And I grew up Catholic, like I talked about in my first episode, but this just feels so different. And I don't know, just like pure. That's really like the word that I can use. And Anna has deep, deep, deep Christian faith. And it was really beautiful to peel layers back and ask her about her journey, how her faith influences her art and the inspirations that she garners from tuning in, praying, being guided, and just trusting. Like, I think the theme of trust is so internally rooted in one's faith, whatever faith it is that you have, whether it is Jesus or the universe or whoever your God is. Like, the notion of trusting a higher power and finding peace in that is really the idea that I have, like, it's really just rocked my world. Because I think up until recently, like within the last year, there was so much that I was trying to do on my own. Like always believing in God, always having grown up in, the church and with my different flavors of faith. But it was really about like me. It was very self-focused. And clearly with exploring personal development and coming to know myself even more, that idea of depending on myself, I think became so much more just ingrained in me and feeling like I have to figure this out. I have to like do this. I have to prove to myself and to other people that I could do this. And yeah, again, I keep referencing that first episode because I really dive deeper into talking about this on the show. So if you guys are curious, go back and listen to that one for more context. But my real, not to use a pun, but come to Jesus moment was in recognizing like, this isn't about me. Like, it is not about me. Like, there is someone steering the ship here. And the more that I could depend on this entity, like whatever we want, like, how do you describe God, right? Like energy, like essence, pure love. The more that you just can kind of take a step back and be like, all right, like things are not as crazy as I think they are. I can make them out to be. It's hard to explain. My boyfriend has been a beautiful support system for me and helping me just really like find more resting in this, as in addition to my mentor that I'm working with. There are people of deep faith in their own different unique ways, but it's really been such a beautiful journey in that regard of me just like finding deeper peace and not feeling as though I have to figure it out all the time. So kind of a tangent there in this intro and realizing it's a long-winded one, but I don't know, I just felt called to share that because there was so much related to the topic of faith that we went into in this episode. And also once we stopped recording, Anna and I just kept riffing on life, on other topics that I even told her, I'm like, I kind of wish we were still recording because there's so much goodness here, but I don't think it was meant to be recorded. I think it was really, she reflected to me. She's like, I think this is just for you and I to know. And I was like, I think so. And oh man, reflecting on that conversation with her, again, I'm recording this in real time. So it's been a couple months, maybe a month and a half since we had this dialogue. And it's just so interesting when I look back at the place that I was just a few months ago, short months ago, and how lost I was feeling. Really, this was, in the middle. I had the recording with Anna and like all this stuff is coming up and all this discomfort and have this conversation with her. And it just moved me so much and just offered me the reassurance that I didn't even know that I needed. So that is my hope for you friends tuning into this episode in whatever ways this conversation offers you reassurance on your path, whether that is you navigating a career transition, whether that is you acknowledging a part from your childhood that you never got a chance to meet. Maybe it is the artist dream or doing a different career or pursuing whatever the heck it used to be that used to light you up, or just finding glimmers of inspiration related to creativity and turning into long-term purpose and the power of hobbies and just creating for joy and so much more that we dive into in this dialogue. I just hope that it leaves you inspired, moved in whatever ways possible. So thank you, Anna, so deeply for coming on the show for this really expansive conversation. And I just express my gratitude to you for your beautiful words and your reflections in this dialogue and after the conversation. And yeah, that's it, you guys. I'm going to leave it here because I can go on and on, but I'll let you guys dive into this conversation because she's a good one. So without further ado, I give you Anna Núñez, friends. Hello, Anna. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. And before we dive into all things topics of change, transitions, pivots, I love to start each conversation with a little bit of an icebreaker question. And that is, what is something that has been bringing you joy this past month?
I watched a few of your episodes before coming on the podcast, and I was like, if she asked me this question, like, what's my answer going to be? Because it's such a good icebreaker, and it's not always something that's like really front of mind. At least not for me. I'm like, it's a good question. I think what was it? What's bringing me joy
What's
right
bringing
now?
you
Or like,
joy or
okay,
fulfillment, happiness, however you want to categorize that word.
yeah. I think I've been thinking a lot about like community and like our friendships and stuff. And I think right now what's bringing me a lot of like daily like gratitude and joy has been like friends. We have like dinner parties with friends and like Bible study every week and like I've been like reflecting a lot on like how thankful I am for my husband and my community. We're actually in the process right now of trying to sell our house. And so I think
Ooh.
that's like part of what's making me like feel extra sentimental. And like as I walk
Yeah.
around the house, I'm like, oh, we had this dinner party here, we had this party there. This good conversation. Like I've been like more reflective lately on like just how our house has like cultivated those conversations and those relationships. I feel like that's really been a good source of gratitude and joy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Nothing like the home to like really stir
Mm.
all the feelings because
Oh yeah.
that is my whole ethos with my brand and everything that I do, leading with this
Yeah. Yeah.
intentionality and meaning of home. So there's always a soft spot for me there whenever it relates to like
Mm.
clients having a personal story with home or just someone talking about it. Is this the home that you designed or redesigned with your husband? Okay, so there's like
Yeah.
probably extra depth and meaning with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We bought this house in 2020 and it was our first home and it also was like our first ever venture into like a fixer upper project.
Mm.
And we just like dove straight into the deep end. Like
Yeah.
we picked the worst, like most rundown house we could find because it just was what was in our budget and also we had this vision for like what we wanted to turn it into. And so yeah, we really dove headfirst and we renovated it from top to bottom. And so, yeah, this has been like our first home, our first project. It's been really, really sweet, but I am like okay with moving on. Like I'm ready for what's next. And
Yeah.
as sad as it's been to like let it go, and as many people have been like, why? How could you sell this? It's still like it feels like the right decision for us. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When you know that change is coming, uh, you
Hmm.
kind of know. I had similar feelings because I had lived in Boston for 10 years. And I think it was like 6 months before I finally moved back here home to Connecticut. I just knew I'm like, there's not the spark, that like thing that's grounding you, that's keeping you there, just kind of started dissipating. And after 10 years, I'm like, I think I can close the chapter on this. And I also, too, was in a beautiful apartment that I was renting, had a great deal on it. But when you know it's time to go, you know it's time to
Yeah.
go. So,
Yeah. Boston's super cool. I we got to visit Boston last summer for my sister-in-law's wedding
yeah,
and it was so pretty. I really
yeah.
liked it.
It will
Yeah.
always
Well,
have a soft spot in my heart.
she got married in the Cape. She got married in Cape Cod, so it was like we did like a Boston Cape Cod
Oh,
thing. I
yeah,
was
you
like,
gotta.
I think I'm a New England girly. I really like it up here.
There's a part of Anna that's
Yeah.
northeast.
Well, it's like the beach and the coastal vibes that I love, but like nice weather, you know.
Yeah,
Florida's like always just so brutal.
yeah, yeah.
That in the summer up there, I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, on the topic of knowing when change comes and all those things, I guess even before we dive into that, um, I'd love to maybe just set the scene for people listening on who you are. And it's a simple question: who is Anna Núñez? But however detailed or simple you want to address that and answer that, feel free.
Oh, sure. I'm an artist. I live in Florida with my husband. I make abstract paintings that are usually on the larger scale side. I've been like pushing the larger scale work more and more, but I used to be a graphic designer. So for like 6 or 7 years out of college, that's what I was doing, and I always knew that I wanted to be doing something creative, that I wanted to be an artist in some realm. But it's really funny how like my teenage self was kind of like skeptical of that dream and like kind of doubtful. And so I even went into art school in college with kind of that like hesitation of like, can I actually make this a job? I don't know what that looks like. What would I do? How would I be creative? I just knew that I had this creativity in me that I wanted to express somehow. But through college, I went through different phases of different dreams and thinking like, maybe I'd work for anthropology, maybe I'd be a sculptor. But then I kind of just like stumbled into illustration and design work. And I started getting like little one-off jobs even when I was still in college. And so I realized all of a sudden like, oh, that's a way that I can make money. I could actually be creative with that. And so then I got an internship. I started freelancing. It all just kind of like progressed naturally. And then I started doing education. It just kind of like flowed. But then I had this come to Jesus moment in like 2021, I think, or 2022, where I just realized like my actual true dream was to be painting. And I had like discovered my love for that on the sidelines of graphic design. So I was like doing it off and on like over the years too, but it just was always on the back burner, always something that I didn't necessarily like make the space or time to like do more of that or cultivate that. But we had reached a point with the design business, because my husband eventually joined me on it, where it just wasn't super fulfilling for either of us. And as much as we like enjoyed the people we were helping and serving, we both just were like, this isn't it. We don't want to do this forever. And so we reached kind of a crossroads where it naturally like made sense to take the leap of faith. And yeah, I started painting, and now that is what I do. Yeah. Now I'm making artwork. So, and I'm loving it. So far, so good.
Yeah, and your art is absolutely beautiful. And I'm excited to dive more into your art journey specifically.
Sweet.
I think selfishly for me too, because there is the artist in me, the person who loves to just tangibly work with her hands and create things, mm-hmm. whether that is my own painting journey. I love to do mixed media collage, all of that. It started for me when I was super young, like scrapbooking as a child. And it's translated and evolved in all these different ways. And it's interesting because my business too, similar to what sounds like you and your husband started, is solely all digital. And there's this thing that I'm finding that I feel like is missing, which is the tangible piece. And there's just something, I mean, if anyone out there listening is someone who's ever worked with their hands, and it doesn't specifically have to be art. I mean, even producing music or writing, or I mean, any forms of creative expression, there is just a difference. And I don't know, I consider myself such an old soul too, that there's like, while I love the efficiency of a good computer, it's like something handmade and craft is just so incredible. So I guess just out of curiosity, because this question is top of mind, what is it about painting specifically that has always whispered to you or drawn to you, or that you just personally find yourself enjoying in this season compared to maybe what you were doing in graphic design? Maybe you can speak to like some of those nudges and whispers that came up while you were in your business, but you were still thinking about painting in the background. Because I think this is something we all deal with, where like you're doing something, you enjoy it, but maybe something in the back of our minds is pestering us like, there's that thing and it won't shut up and leave me alone.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's I have so many thoughts. Yeah, I mean, painting wasn't necessarily like that specific medium didn't necessarily like call to me like for my whole entire life. I didn't actually even end up taking any painting classes when I was in college. So that was something that just like, I kind of just discovered that I enjoyed like on the way as I was designing. And I do think that it was probably in response to wanting something more tangible to work on and more physical, tactile. It's funny that you mentioned that, because after my husband and I, like Jesus is his name, after we like kind of decided to part from that business, the design business, he went and started a candle company, because he was like, I just need to do something physical, like in the world, and like work with materials and packaging and like product. And so we both kind of, I think, were feeling that need to like get away from the screen. But it's like, it is just I think it's such a human thing to like want to create with our hands. And I think even if people are like still in design, like if I was still doing graphic design and I felt like that was my purpose and like what I was meant to be doing, like I still would have hobbies on the side. Like I still would be like crocheting or like taking fun art classes or like, because I think we need that to like fill us back up with inspiration. Like there was so many times where like going to an antique store and finding antiques or books or different things like that are very tactile would inspire my design work. Or like painting, I would make a background for like something that I would use in my design work, you know? So like,
Yeah.
I think that always is just like, it can be life-giving no matter if like you are sticking with the road of like something digital um, or not. But yeah, I think that kind of answers the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
totally. And it resonates very much for me too, because I found myself at a divide. I remember when I went to college for architecture,
Oh,
and
cool.
school was so beautifully stimulating for me because it was very art based versus technical. Because there are some architecture schools that are more like engineering and structural, where you're just doing like
Yeah.
math and
I
computations.
was gonna say, I feel like there's both. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, but
yeah.
the curriculum that I had at my college at Wentworth at Boston was so surprisingly artistic, and I had no idea. Like I didn't really know what I was signing up for when I got into architecture. I just remember as a kid watching HGTV and knowing like I want to design spaces.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
when I went on the path of studying architecture, it was so much like model making and learning how to draw. And there were electives with like watercolor classes. Like it was so stimulating on all fronts.
That's
And
so
then you get
cool.
into the corporate life and there's none of that. And I'm like, and I didn't know it at the time. And it's so interesting looking back because you're like, if I knew then what I know now, obviously, you know, hindsight's 2020, but like 2 weeks within that job, I knew something was off, but I didn't know quite what it was. And it didn't take me until another maybe year that I actually started Studio Dumka, which now has become my business, but at the time was an outlet for me to make handmade cards. So it was
Mm,
this like combination of hand making art and architectural cards and honestly an homage to my childhood scrapbooking. But I
I love
think
that.
it sounds like, you know, to you sharing all these little side outlets too, I think for people listening, it's so important too. And maybe we're biased because we're creative, so we see all this stuff around us all the time. But even if you don't resonate with an art practice per se, doing something outside of whether it is, you know, you working a corporate job or something that is just not completely filling your cup, like finding those side outlets where you can channel that is so critical. And it's so interesting in reflecting back on my experience, like how long that maybe took me to recognize. And I'm curious for you if that's always been something natural or inherent. Like, would you call yourself a natural born creative, like from the womb? Because it sounds like creativity and your expression has followed you from the very start.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I think, well, I personally think that everyone is creative. And I just think as you get older and as you grow, like the difference between people that are like considered creative and not creative is really just who had that cultivated in them as at a young age. So I think like you watch children make art, it's like they're all creative. They all have this natural born instinct to make. Like that is just that's us. That's
Yeah.
humans. But I think some of us are more fortunate to have people in our lives that nurture that, that see that, and kind of like cultivate it and tell us that we can do it and that we are creative um, as we grow. Yeah, but I've been creative for
Yeah.
ever. My mom was really good at noticing that and giving me all kinds of activities. She told me that that was like the one way she could get me to be still was like by
Mm,
giving me art projects and things to like glue and cut and tape and
yeah.
so yeah,
I
that's
love
always been
that.
an outlet for me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I want to back up a little bit to what you were talking about in your journey around having the initial kind of doubts and hesitations around making art as your full-time profession. Can you talk
Hmm.
about that? Because I feel like this is such a common thing that anyone who feels that creative pull probably more than likely navigates. I can say that I too struggle with this as I think about, well, if I was to pursue more of my artistic, non graphic design things, what would that look like? So I'm
Yeah.
personally kind of navigating that right now. But I'm curious
Hmm.
if you can speak a little bit more to what those doubts were, what was driving them. Yeah, anything you can share.
Yeah, I think at the time when I was experiencing doubt around like how could I be creative for a living? I think that was really just because I hadn't seen it modeled for me at that point. Because even though like my parents are like creative in their own ways, that's not like what they've done for profession. So they were always really loving and supportive, which I think was a huge piece of my story that I'm really grateful for. But yeah, I just didn't know what it would look like. So I think I definitely had this sense of like, how can this actually be a job? Like, I really don't know. And that's part of why noticing like a shop like Anthropology, for example, like that was big and like, you know, the 2010s and 13s, like when I was a teenager, I was like, well, that's a job that's creative. I could do that. So I went to college with that vision in my mind just because it's something that I saw. But yeah, I think when it comes to being creative though, it's normal to experience so many doubts because it's a pretty like vulnerable expression. You're kind of like you're very like raw and vulnerable when you're sharing like these are my ideas, these are the things that I made. Like so I think I definitely resonate with creatives that are walking through periods of doubt with their work because I just think it's like something that we all go through and something we all experience. And it's easy to look at different artists or different creatives and be like, well, they've got to figure it out. But the reality is that like, you know, there's like a doubt cycle, like on a regular, like weekly basis for all artists. We're like, yeah, daily. Like I'll make something. Jesus and I like to joke about how we go through this like cycle where you'd be like, oh, I really like this. This is really cool. Oh, this is absolute garbage. I hate it. Oh no, I really like it. It's good. Like it's just so normal. But I think when it's something that means a lot to you, it's worth pursuing and moving through those doubts. Because the other side is really sweet, getting to express yourself. But I also think it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about how like the hobby has been kind of like underrated in this modern day of like making everything into like a creative side hustle. Like I almost feel like that's another area where it should be encouraged, like for people to have hobbies. Like not everything has to be a success overnight or has to be a full-time job right away. Like you can cultivate something, you can have fun. You don't have to like make a lot of money, but I think we experience a lot of pressure. And I think that's where a lot of doubt can come from as well.
Yeah, I really love that you shared this last piece because I love the sentiment, like leaning more into your hobbies, like bring hobbies back. Maybe that
Yeah,
could be
let's bring hobbies
let's
back.
bring
Yeah.
hobbies back. Maybe that could be a rally we get behind
Yeah,
for
for real.
2025. I love this. And I think when Etsy came on the scene, they gave permission for people to like bring that a little bit more to the light. But to something you shared about that point that I agree with is when money and business starts to get involved, like it's such a fine line because then it like you find yourself getting like the life and the fun sucked out of you. And that's where it becomes it's almost like this innocent, natural, organic, like very free flowing thing that was an inspired thought that pulls you suddenly morphs into something that's more business money driven, or it can at least. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that because when I was doing, I can speak for this personally myself, when I was doing my handmade cards back when I was still at that architecture job, I loved it very much thinking that I was going to be a stationery designer. But what set me back is just the logistics of it. How do I mass hand produce hundreds of cards and sell them at a value that is actually going to be worthwhile? And
Yeah.
what became this like very free flowing thing where I would just make a card for someone for a special occasion eventually just kind of like fizzled because I burnt myself out from trying to
Yeah.
monetize that. And so I'm almost like trying to refine my connection with that without any weight, like no money, just like a private little experiment or activity for me and me alone. So I don't know, I'm curious because you mentioned the money piece, like what your thoughts
Yeah.
are on that and like the maybe the balance that lies with creating for creating's sake versus always trying to like monetize it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this like creative's dilemma when it comes to like monetizing your art. Because some people do really dive headfirst into that and then it becomes like a burnout thing or like they're not enjoying it anymore. I think what money at least does for me is it tests like how disciplined I am in what I'm doing and like how dedicated am I to seeing this through to the long run. Because for me, it's like, I know that I want to be a painter. I know I want to do this for the rest of my life. So it's like, if I'm experiencing fatigue or burnout or financial challenges, it just forces me to get creative in a new way. And so it's like, for you, maybe you're not meant to be a stationary designer forever. Maybe that wasn't like your forever calling. Maybe that was just for a season. Because if it was your forever calling, maybe you would have figured out like, okay, how can I make this more scalable? How can I get creative with this challenge? Because I think what's hard with this is just my personal opinion. I think when people dive so hard, like so quickly into like trying to monetize their art, they're just kind of forced quickly to have to decide like, wait, is this what I want to do forever? Because there are some challenges I'm going to have to overcome in order to make this work. Because I think you can get creative with monetizing your art, and there's ways to do it, but it takes like that bit of determination to have to go through all the discomfort along the way. And for me, it's like, it's worth the discomfort because I need to be doing this, you know?
Yeah, there's so much there that you shared that's so good. I think number one, on the money piece, it feels to me like looking at your relationship with money and also kind of identifying like what does that mean for you and to you in the context of what you're doing. I think the last piece that you shared is like, how much do you actually want this? Because I think there's a lot that, I mean, I feel this even with my graphic design work that I'm doing. It's like, do I love this deep enough to do this every single day? Like there has to be something deeper driving and steering the ship. At least, I don't know. That's my personal opinion because I'm a very like purpose, passion driven person that if I'm not doing something that lights me up, like you cannot force me to do it. Like I've been in those positions working my, first kind of corporate jobs, and after a while it's like, okay, the spark is gone. What's next? What's that deeper anchor holding me down?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot about just having like vision. And I think your vision, like, I think the seasons can change. Like as a creative, like when I was in the thick of design work, like I was giving it my all every day because that was what I had committed to at the time. But I think I always had this kind of like umbrella mindset of like, but I'm allowed to change my mind, So I think it's about like giving yourself that kind of like broad permission to like, I'm not handcuffed to this passion. I don't have to do this. But when you are in the middle of it, like, I think it can help a lot to have that long-term kind of commitment to it. Like, because then it can get you through. Like, have you read Seth Godin's book, like The Dip?
I have not. No.
I think maybe it's The Big Dip. I forget. It's a very short little book, but I found it really encouraging because it kind of illustrates the fact that like entrepreneurs, creatives, these people, like we go through the dip and it's like a test of like, can you get out of the dip? Is the longevity piece there? Is it worth it to go through that? I might be just tangent.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Going off on a tangent.
No,
now,
I love this. And this actually leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you related to this transition that you were navigating before you decided to go all in with your painting. How long did you have your company, your graphic design company, for with Anna Núñez?
I freelanced for a few years, and then Jesus and I like joined forces, and Anna Núñez became more official, and then that was probably for like another 3 or 4 years. So probably like 6 to 7 total I was doing design work.
Yeah, I'm curious about what maybe feelings you were navigating in that transition, because our businesses, with building something of our own, a lot of us like to call them our babies, and they're so personal and we pour everything in them, and our identity could be wrapped up in them, which is something too that I've grappled with in the last year. And so when it came to recognizing this pivot, and I love what you shared about like the permission and being okay with changing, was it something that was like, when the idea for pivoting came to you and leaving your company behind to transition, how did that feel? What feelings came up for you? Was it a relatively easy or easeful process, or did you grapple with any resistance with letting go and what that could mean?
I think I think I definitely did have moments after like I like officially like pivoted where I was like, I could go back and just do some branding work and make some money right now. And that was definitely like a temptation. So that's normal. I just think it was a very spread out decision. Like I had been thinking about it. I'd been wanting to try it for like a couple years leading up to it, to like officially like making a website, telling everyone this is what I'm doing. It had been in the works for a while. But yeah, it just was kind of like, it was like going back to how you said like your time in Boston like just came to a close. It just felt like that our time with that business was kind of naturally coming to a close. Like we weren't as on fire for what we were like we were creating some like education, but we were running into like some logistical challenges with like advertising and like launches that were kind of flopping, and it wasn't really like, it wasn't worth going through that like that dip, you know, for both of us, because you know we were starting to like, honestly, we were starting to like bicker a little bit around the business, and like it wasn't that, you know, fun for our marriage. Like there was all kinds of things that were like going on around it that we were like, this just isn't it. We need to like switch it up. And thankfully that business, like we had built it in a way where it had a lot of like products that created some like residual income. So like on a technical side, like it was helping with the transition, like logistically, to not just feel like, you know, 0 to 100, like I'm going to paint now and we're going to make money overnight.
Yep.
So that was helpful. But yeah, I was just feeling in my heart, like when I'm old, like something I thought about a lot is like when I'm older, when I'm a grandma, what do I want to like, what kind of legacy of my life do I want to leave for my grandkids? Like, what do I want like my life to be like a picture of? And I really pictured myself as a fine artist, as leaving my kids, my grandkids, like paintings and sculptures and things that I made with my hands. And for me, like leaving them like logos, like a portfolio of like logos, like that wasn't it for me. Yeah. I was like, and I think there's so many like incredible designers out there where like that is their legacy. That's amazing for them. But like for me, I was like that. I just don't think I'm meant to be a designer forever. And so I just felt like it was like a calling on my life that like I had like prayed about. I just felt like, you know, it was time. I felt like thankfully I had the support of a husband who's like, no, you can do it. Like, let's just take this leap. But yeah, that was like what was going through my head. Really thinking a lot about like legacy and like who God made me to be and like what I am supposed to be doing with my life, and kind of had that like eye-opening moment.
I love that. And that's such a good question that you know, anyone listening can ask themselves, especially if they're finding themselves in a moment, career related or relationship related, like living situation related, of being stuck. I think it's Lewis House who gives the exercise, like it could be a little morbid, but write your future obituary. Like, what does it say? How do you envision leaving this earth? And I love the word legacy. It's like, what is the legacy that you're leaving behind? Because that could be such a powerful motivator for people, for change, but also just to kind of envision their lives and dream into their potential. Because I think that's something too that I see so often. This honestly is like the most painful feeling on my heart. Like when I meet a person or I'm talking to someone and I see their potential, like some beautiful gift that they have. And I ask them about that. And then they just kind of dismiss it. Or they're like, yeah, but I can never do that. Or like there's some limiting belief or story there. And I'm like,
do you want to like shake them?
No, like I want to like, give them a self-help book or like send them like an inspirational, motivational speech. But it pains me because I don't know, I'm such a believer of like exactly what you said, like pursuing your potential. Just like going after life. And of course that takes maybe some work, or more work for others than it does for other people. And I think that's so dependent maybe on context, like how you grew up. I love that you shared that your parents were very encouraging and nudged you. I think that's so beautiful and such a gift, because I could see it being a little more challenging for someone who doesn't have that. Maybe there's more doubt instilled, but I see it as, you know, an opportunity maybe in their lives to work through that. And of course, my hope is always like they do work through that and they follow their pursuits and passions, but also acknowledging that, you know, that's not everyone's journey and we just have to lead by example. Like I think really following our own pursuits and hopefully just inspiring from afar. Because I'm actually curious if you've garnered any reflections from friends or loved ones based on the journey that you've taken, because I've seen it in my own life, just in even like little micro decisions that I've made, whether it's moving somewhere or pursuing some passions, people reflecting to me this kind of idea of inspiration that surprises me sometimes. I'm like, oh, really? Like I'm just doing what I enjoy.
Hmm.
And it sounds like you're so purpose led. And I'm curious if
Hmm.
you've had that reflected to you by any people in your life.
Like if people have modeled that for me or if people have like noticed it
If
in
people have
me.
noticed it.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not like told often like, Anna, you inspire me, but I definitely like, I get a sense that like, I mean, the way that Jesus and I live is like a little bit unconventional compared to our friends. Like we're not 9 to 5ers. We're just like being creative. Like people ask us what we're up to or how we're doing. I'm like, just doing my best. Like we're just out here
Yeah.
making stuff and like trying to live a creative life. But I think like a way that I did notice that more was the leap that we took with our house specifically.
Hmm.
Um, I did start to notice like once the house was finished, people were like, "Oh wow, like you that's amazing. Like I didn't think you guys could do it." Like we actually had like really good friends that were like, "We thought you were crazy." But like now we're inspired. Um, so that's been like an example of like kind of a cool way where like we just did our thing, and I
Hmm.
think it to some degree I think inspired our community, our friends maybe.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I love the idea of like the ripple effect. And a lot of times you don't even know this, but how you
Mm,
just living your life in integrity impacts other people and influences them
yeah,
in
definitely.
so many different ways. I wanna back up to your painting journey again and ask you that when you finally decided to make that switch, so deciding to leave your business, go into painting full time, how were those beginnings for you? Did you find moments of ease and flow? Did you find resistance? I'm curious.
I mean, yeah, lots of resistance, I would say. It was definitely not like a super breezy, I'm a painter now, everything's easy. We're just flowing
Mm,
in the studio, having a fun time. I definitely felt like I walked through a season of like all my self confidence that I thought I had before that being like really challenged.
hmm,
And I think that was because painting just meant so much to me. Like making art in this format, just it felt very vulnerable. It meant a lot. I had built up kind of a following on Instagram from the design like journey. So I had some people that I felt like were like watching or following along. So I felt this pressure of like when every time I shared something, I'm like, I hope people like this, you know? So I think it was different than design work because I kind of detached a little bit and I was like, well, if they don't like it, it's just a logo like that I
yeah.
made. But when I share a painting, I'm like, oh, I really hope they like it, you know? So it's just like a different feeling. I felt definitely like I struggled a bit with my self confidence of just, kind of keeping steady in that regard of like still continuing to like put myself out there even when I felt like a little nervous to do it. Um, and yeah, I mean, just like personally, it was like a season of I don't know if it was like coincidental overlap, but it was like a season where I experienced a lot of like anxiety for the first time in my adult life. And like that was
Hmm.
like kind of a hard season to walk through. And like in hindsight, I'm really thankful that I had painting because I noticed that I was able to kind of like work that out in a way, like in painting. But yeah, it wasn't like super, super easy breezy. I've noticed that like now that I've really persevered through that season of like struggling to kind of like find my voice a little bit more and like my style like I've started to experience like in the last like I don't know even just like 6 to 9 months where I feel like now I'm in a good like spot where I feel like I'm vibing with what I'm making in the studio and it's flowing a little bit more. But yeah, it was like a multiple years it took kind of I think to get to that point. um, I was excited about what I was putting out all along the way, but I definitely experienced this like a bit of a like a rattling of my self-confidence when I first started to do it. Like I remember walking into my studio and just being like, whoa, like I'm taking this seriously now. Like I actually have a room in my house dedicated to this.
Yeah.
It felt like a little bit more pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I thank you for sharing all that because it really speaks to, I think, the truth that a lot of people may not obviously see and recognize too that comes with pursuing something that is so meaningful and deep to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question that I want to ask next is what did keep you going and what was the driver for you, especially in those moments where the anxiety came up and the self-confidence was down? Like what was that thread that was pulling you all the way through?
I really think it was my faith. Yeah, I think my Christian faith, my belief that God has a plan for me, reading the Bible, being reminded of my identity in Christ, like what I believe, what I hold dear to my heart, um, yeah, that really got me through, honestly. That helped me a lot
Mm,
on the days that were really hard. I would just meditate on okay, what does God say about this hardship that I'm experiencing? And that really helped me through. I think that, and also just having a very loving husband, he got me through it as well. But
yeah, I love
mhm.
that. That's so beautiful. And I'm curious too, with your faith, have you always been a faithful person? Or have you, I'm curious if your art practice in a way maybe deepened your faith.
It definitely has.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the church, so I was always familiar with Christianity and yeah, it's a belief in God. But I mean, I think a lot of people, it didn't become personal until I was an adult. You have to make that decision for yourself of what you are going to believe
For
and
sure.
what your faith journey is going to look like. Um, but yeah, I experienced it a lot more as an adult, and I felt in that season of becoming trying to become a painter officially, that's when I felt it deepened even more, because then it's oh, I was clinging to this a lifeline to get me through some days. And there's really beautiful passages in the Bible about anxiety and what God says about anxiety, and stories of um Jesus calming the waves, and
Right.
God Jesus walking on water, and these different stories I started to really hold fast to, and they started to become inspiration for my paintings. And it was just this kind of marriage of faith and creativity. And the more I read the Bible too, the more I realized God is creative, and he made us to create. And so that
Mm,
was a really cool thing. I mean, if you just look at the Genesis story, the first book of the Bible is a creation story. It's about God creating, Um, so that brought me a lot of inspiration, and yeah, really deepened my faith.
yeah, I love that. And I think what is really beautiful to see, because I'll get your newsletter every now and then and I'll read the inspiration behind your
Oh, yay.
paintings. And I love the stories and the drivers behind each one because it feels like most, if not all, are rooted in your faith. So I'm curious on your creative process and how you go about making a painting. Like what sparks that and what is the, I mean, I guess, yeah, again, that word, the driver for each individual
Hmm.
piece that you're making.
Yeah, I think each individual piece for me definitely has its own story. Um, but I'm not always thinking about the story until the end when it's done. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a reverse. I'm almost having to decipher what that painting meant to me in the moment I was making it. Once it was finished.
Oh, that's so
Um,
interesting. Hmm.
yeah, that's just kind of my process. And for a while, I thought oh, maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should have an idea in mind and make a piece about this specific thing. But I find that for me, I just need to what I do is I get in the studio, I get out my paints, I figure out what color palettes are speaking to me that day, what, and I'm kind of it's very intuitive. I'm just trying to have fun also.
Yeah.
Just kind of have a childlike approach to it. And then once the work is made, I'll look at the marks, I'll look at the colors, I'll kind of test out different names and see what does that feel like it looks like, I'll just, or sometimes I'll use scripture, almost like poetry, to help me find names, or I'll look in books, or I'll look notes on my phone that I keep. So I'll look for the name, and then I'll kind of fill in all the gaps too of okay, now I think I know what this piece is about.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what I really, really appreciate about your process is not only does it sound, I mean, use the word backwards, but I'll push back and say super unique.
Oh, thank you.
In that, to your point, like it may feel backwards because when you think about maybe an order or something being done a particular way, you question, like you said, is this right? Um,
Hmm.
but I think, like you mentioned earlier, around just giving yourself permission to like change and pivot or move away from something, it very much sounds similar in that you're giving yourself permission and allowing yourself for your own creative process to look exactly uniquely as it's meant to look for you. Because I think that's something so beautiful too about the artistic process is that it can be quite literally anything that you want. And my biggest value in life, or one of my biggest ones, I really love this idea of freedom. For me, freedom means doing anything I want whenever I want, no kind of restrictions. And when I think about creative freedom, that really, like in that regard, whether it's your process or how you share or how you do certain things, that feels so liberating and expansive for me. So to hear that you basically gave yourself permission to do that and in the process created your own kind of unique approach is just, yeah, really lovely.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it's interesting with painting. There's all kinds of like complementary things that are happening at once where it's like I resonate with your like desire to like be really free in the creative process, but then I also like have this like deep appreciation for discipline.
Mm.
And I think that's like a cool element of life. And I even see this in my faith where it's like God gives us freedom. Jesus gives like he gives us permission to like live in this freedom, but there are still um like parameters that are like recommended for living an even better life. And I see this like parallel in my painting where it's like I give myself freedom, but I still constrain to like 5 colors, or I still like
Mm.
give myself a 48 by 48 inch canvas, or like there's still, and so a lot of my work too deals with this idea of like release and control. And there's the constraints, but then there's also the freedom. And so it's like, you can see that in life a lot. Um, or like you can see it mirrored in life and in faith and in art. But yeah,
Yeah, I
what you were saying made me think about that too. It's like I resonate with the freedom, and I also love discipline in a way too.
yeah, and it feels like you have the balance or the dance between both. I mean, it feels very integral to your work, but I also feel like you have a really keen awareness of how to kind of blend the two together. I was actually going to ask you about the question of control because it sounds like your creative process, at least from the beginning of what you were sharing, was very intuitive and inspired and kind of freedom led.
Mm-hmm.
And control for me is really interesting because I've been working on it a lot. I would categorize myself as a classic type A perfectionist when it comes
Mm.
to art, creativity, all that, of course. And I've softened a lot in the last couple of years, especially as I started garnering more awareness on it. But what's really fascinating is when I look at my own personal art practice over the years, when I started doing just my side painting and mixed media collages, it's interesting how they started very structured and controlled, like using tape to outline like these very geometric patterns. And then as they've progressed, they became so much more like expressive and messy. And it's like I'm slowly getting more comfortable with allowing myself to be messy and just allow it
Mm.
to look that way. So I'm curious on that balance for you with the discipline and the freedom. Has that come from the beginning just intuitively, or did you kind of grapple with either or?
Um, I don't know. I think I recognize that like I think as creatives sometimes we think that like parameters or restraints or like those different like things that you would consider like controlling to your creative process. I think it's tempting to look at them in like a negative light. But I think a lot of times like parameters like can actually open up a lot of like creative possibility. Like you think about people that like um I don't know. I'm trying to find like a good example.
I'm thinking of actually, as you
Like,
say that, I'm thinking of Atomic Habits, that book, where like
yeah,
more structure creates more freedom. Like if you do a morning routine,
yes,
then you will have more freedom to do XYZ
yes.
throughout the day, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think about that when I think about painting sometimes is like it's kind of a fun, it can be like a fun creative challenge to be like, I'm going to give myself the color red and we're going to see what we create. And like, I think leaning into that can be really, it can just be like another avenue, like another way to like test your creativity or like, um, yeah, just give yourself like new ideas. But it is interesting how like if you keep examples of your work over time, and I'd love to see your collages. I don't think I've seen them on your
Oh yeah, I'll be happy to
site or
share.
anything,
Yeah.
but it is cool like when you keep your artwork and like record of your creativity, how you can see yourself kind of growing and evolving as a person like through the art that you're making. And how like it is tempting to be like, oh, very precious about something, and then like the
Hmm.
longer you do it, the more comfortable you get, the more you're like, well, I'm going to test this boundary, I'm going to like test this new idea, we're going to see like what we can create from here. And I think that's like a fun part of the creative process and just like growing.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like another permission slip too, to
Yeah.
almost like reframe the idea of structure being stifling and limiting. Because I that the specific example you shared of, in within the painting realm, just using the color red and seeing what comes up from that.
Yeah.
I immediately see opportunities for how you can push that and challenge that. So I love that as an invitation for anyone. Just it's interesting because it almost feels counterintuitive. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're given a blank slate, it's like could be the most freeing, but also the most stifling thing ever. I
You
experienced
have
this
so many
my
options.
yeah, I experienced this
Yeah.
myself when I have this is so actually hilarious as I say it. I have meetings with clients most days, and I structure my day around those calls because I know I have to be home and et cetera, et cetera. And then I have like a random Wednesday where I have no calls, and I'm so excited because I'm like, perfect, this is my free day. But then Wednesday morning comes and I am paralyzed.
Yeah. That's so real.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I noticed that like, yeah, like it even makes me think of when I would work with branding clients. It's like the clients that are just like, I like anything. Show me what
Yeah.
like I'll know it when I see it. And what if I like it? Like I give you full reign, and then there's no structure, and it's like you can't read their mind. What could you, the options are endless, and it's like
Hmm.
you need that process of like having a vision board, going through it, honing in, asking questions, like narrowing it down, because if the options are just endless, it's like it is like paralyzing. Like there's too many things. And that's why I'm such a big believer of like giving myself like little like creative homework assignments, or like I would do that a lot with design work just to like put more work out there that would attract the clients that I'd want to get, where I'd like give myself a fake brand, like a
Yeah. Yeah.
fictitious project,
Hmm.
or even with artwork, like trying to give myself like kind of fun like projects that are just like very specific little one-offs, or like take like learning from a tutorial, taking a course, like doing things that are just like very honed in, very like direction oriented, and like very specific, and then that can like actually open up so many other ideas for other things. It's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, I love this. I love this. It's really leaning on some idea of structure because I think this is such a personal word too, however you want to define it, but some driver to keep you going. And
Mm-hmm.
in relation to the branding in particular, I mean, this is familiar for the both of us because we do kind of we similar work in the branding process, but I think this applies to this could apply to so many different things because I relate very much to what you shared about someone tells you, yeah, just give me anything. I have
You're
no
like, no.
parameters. But this is where
Yeah.
I've had to work quite a lot at refining my process and finding that thing that always grounds and roots the idea deeper. It's like, it's the purpose, it's the foundation, whatever kind of word you want to call it.
Yep.
And I think this has carryovers with this idea of the structure, just some guidelines, some framework to carry you through your process because too much freedom can almost, yeah, just be like a counterintuitive thing where it can actually be paralyzing. So I think the balance and the dance between two is, it sounds like the ultimate challenge, and one that I imagine you do more of becomes or can become easier. So, yeah, I love what you shared.
Thanks.
Um, a question that I wanted to ask you too, just looking at this whole, we can say like your whole timeline of your career journey, your creative journey to date. As you were speaking in the beginning, you mentioned about things just kind of flowing into each other. You know, you went into school, you kind of had doubts about, actually making art a career, but then little freelance things came about, and then eventually Shiz Nunez started, and then the painting journey evolved. Looking back, would you say that it was like an organic process, like an organic unfolding? Or were you met with any moments of deep resistance and uncertainty?
Um, I would say it was more like it folded more organically. It unfolded more
Yeah.
organically. Why can't I struggling on these words? Um, I mean, obviously, there's always going to be resistance along the journey, but I really held it all with open hands, and um, I mean, really trying to release control in life is just something that I'm like constantly. I feel like I'm constantly having to try to learn how to do this. Um, but even back then in college, it was a lot of me being like, okay, God, here's my prayer. Like, I want to learn how to do branding. Would you show me a way to do that? And like, then I went to a market a week later and I met someone who owned a branding agency, and
Mm,
they, and
yeah.
I sent them an email and I was like, do you do any internships? And they were like, not really, but we can for you. And like, and so it was like that cool, it just felt like if I was taking little steps of faith forward, and I felt like God was opening a door, and I would just like walk through that door, and then another door would open. And it was very much me not trying to have every single thing figured out, because I didn't even really know what it could look like. It was me just being curious and like having faith and just walking forward. And then another door would open. And that, I mean, I think it might be tempting for a listener to hear me say that and be like, oh, wow, you had it so easy. But there were a lot of like financial risks that I took, a lot of like peaks and valleys, like
Yeah.
really just throughout the whole experience. Like, there are ups and downs, but I think the through line was if a door opened and it felt like the right door to walk through, I just would walk through it. And then another door would open. And I think that can be quite a comforting way to live when I think about it, because you're not having to figure out everything in advance. You're really just trusting that, you just have to take one step at a time.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like a beautiful mix of curiosity, faith, and also aligned action, because you could be curious and you could have faith, but if you're not actually doing the thing, you're not going to be getting anywhere.
Oh, yes.
So it sounds like a beautiful
Yeah.
combination of all those things. I'm curious
Yeah.
about your relationship with fear. How do you
Fear.
navigate?
Oh.
Yeah. How do you navigate
Deep
that
question.
discomfort?
Fear. Oh man, it just really goes back to faith.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's so normal to be scared about, I mean, fear, like, it's not all bad. Like, I've learned in dealing with anxiety and stuff too, that like, it's there to keep you safe. Like, and I think there's like a book that Elizabeth Gilbert wrote that I read forever ago.
Big
I think
magic.
it might have been called like Big Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
there was
good.
this one part of that book that I'm just now thinking about it. You probably know it, where she talks about like fear kind of like existing in the car with you on a road trip. And like
Mm.
fear is not allowed to touch the
Yes.
driving, the
Yes.
steering wheel.
Yep.
Fear is not allowed. I think I'm quoting this right. I hope I'm quoting it right. But yeah, it's that idea of like fear can be there, but like we're not letting it be in
You're
control. We're not
driving.
letting
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I am the one driving. Fear is not the one driving. And I've really had to like practice that, and like through this process of just living and being an artist, like learning not to let fear be in the driver's seat has been a really big lesson that I'm still constantly learning.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's normalizing it. I think fear holds so much weight for a lot of people, but acknowledging that it's always going to be a part of the process, and to whatever capacity you can leverage it to drive you, I think could be a really beautiful thing. And I think to what you shared, maybe to bring it full circle, is like coming back to what really moves you through everything. And it feels very much like faith is that driver for you, but it's also that connection to the legacy and knowing that you want to leave something behind that is really rooted in something that you
Yeah.
love and you're passionate about.
Yeah, definitely having that vision for my life and that purpose, it makes a lot of those like hard days. It puts them into perspective.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Well, I wanna ask you my closing questions, Anna, a little rapid fire,
Oh
to end
boy.
this really beautiful conversation that we had. These are quick ones, but I mean, you can go as elaborate or deep as you'd like. My first
Okay.
one being, where and how do you garner creative inspiration? Do you have a practice or any kind of techniques or things that you lean on?
Inspiration. I love talking about inspiration.
Mm,
I think, I mean, in addition to like the things that I've already shared about like finding inspiration in the process and being childlike and in my faith, I find so much inspiration in art history
hmm.
and like really trying to like go back in time, find artists that have come before me, artists that I resonate with, and like look at their colors, look at their techniques, look at their stories and just their lives. And I find that to be such a deep well of inspiration. And it's funny, when I was in college, I was so like resistant to like art history. Like I had like drawing professors and printing professors that are like, no, Anna, you need a reference, you need inspiration, you need to look in the past. And I'm like, no, I want to make it up on my own as I
Mm,
go. I'm original and unique. Like I had this mentality of like, I needed to just pull original ideas from my head. But the reality is like, you can lean on like kind of recreating and reinterpreting like works of the past and like merging things together. And like, it just, when you lean in and you're not like a annoyed art college student, and you can like lean into your inner nerd and go back in time, like there's so much to pull from. It is
mm.
so fun. And I think especially in this like modern era of creatives where we're just surrounded by social media noise and Pinterest boards and like so many things online that we like want to pull from. Um, I think the deeper well is like looking in the past and not just looking at like what's current.
Yeah, that is so, so
I'm
good.
passionate.
Yeah, no, I love your response, and it's something again, I don't want to say, I kind of want to say unique, but art history is do we categorize art history as unique? I mean, in the vein that it's so much of the past and carries so much weight. It almost feels like, of course, in a way, but we
Yeah, it's
like
like
don't.
obviously.
Yeah, it's so, so, so
Yeah.
interesting. I think about, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that quote that like there's no such thing as an original idea. It's just like ideas that are replicated or redone,
Repurpose.
repurposed or
Yeah.
something like that. And it is interesting when you think I like the example of the Instagram like reel templates. Like everyone's just like copying everything that's done, and we're just looking to like what's trending. But to your
Mm-hmm.
point, like there's such a well of beautiful potential, and like I think deeper, maybe we could say more intentioned inspiration, because I don't know, there's a part of me that feels like prior to a lot of the distraction that we deal with in today, there was, I don't know, maybe more of this purity from some of the greats, like the artists that I look back on. I don't know, it's a little harder maybe to find now where there's like so much that's being muddied. So I love that as a share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I could talk about it forever.
Hmm.
I think even just like it's funny because it sounds like such a no-brainer where you're like, yeah, of course looking at past artists like could be really inspiring, but it's just not something we think
I know,
about
it's kind
all
of
the time.
unique.
Like we have our phones in our hands. We're
Yeah.
like, there's inspiration right here. But even if you're, for a listener who's listening right now who wants more inspiration, like go to the library and
Oh, I
look
love a
at
good
the art.
library.
Yeah, look at the
Hmm.
art section and see what's there and like pick one book that you're going to go through that's like on one artist. And I think also like my perception of art history used to be like it's old, it's boring, it's just a bunch of portraits and like yeah, I'm not really into like the Baroque Renaissance, like that's not my era. But like once I got more into like, oh, the abstract expressionist, oh, the American abstract expressionist, oh, art in the 50s, like once I start getting into there, I'm like, oh, now I can nerd out. So I think like you start to hone in and find like who are your like who are your like what's the word, like I forget what my art professor used to say, like not your soulmates, but like your who are your like art, not besties. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like who
I
are
like
the
art
people that
bestie. Yeah,
you
we could say art
who's
besties.
your art history bestie that you like
Yeah.
really can take a lot of inspiration from. And then what you'll notice too is like the more you start diving into that world, you're like, oh, that artist was inspired by that artist. Oh, that artist took from that artist. Like you really start to see some cool like through lines that just makes you feel more inspired and
So
excited
good.
to like make something new, join the conversation in a new way.
So good. Or visit a local museum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Go to a museum.
Yeah. So
Museums,
good.
libraries, bookstores.
Yeah. Thank you so
fun.
much. My next question is, do you have any practices, rituals, or techniques that you lean on when you know that an opportunity for change is on the horizon? Whether it's like grounding practices or rituals or something that helps you navigate periods of transition.
I think a lot of prayer, a lot of journaling. I mean, I'm in a period like that right now where we're trying to sell our house and,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have the next place that we're going to live picked out. And we're still trying to navigate like, what is this year even going to look like? Because it's funny, you list a house and you're like, okay, it's going to sell. I'm going to be out next week. And it's like, no, it's a long process. Like you got to wait for a buyer and wait for it to sell. So, uh, I mean, Jesus and I have been talking a lot of just about the theme of like patience and really trying to like be content, be patient. I don't know what like rituals or practices I'd recommend other than just, I mean, we just pray.
Prayer and patience. Yeah. Easier said than done, probably with the patience piece, and also probably with the prayer too.
Yeah.
But I mean, amidst all the more tangible things, like maybe journaling and stuff, I think it
Yeah.
always kind of boils down to that. It's the patience and the prayer. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And journaling's cool in the midst of it too, because you can look back and you can see the like, no season was forever. And it's cool to like go in a period of transition or change. Like you can go back and look at like, if you are someone that journals, look at times in your life where you were going through a similar thing and you're like, wow, look how far I've come
Yeah.
already. You know, it can offer some good like reflection too.
Yeah, I love reading back on some of my journals. It's in moments where I'm especially low to reflect back on journals to almost be the reminder of like, ooh, you were navigating that a few years ago.
Yeah.
It's like it could be a really beautiful exercise for just cultivating a little deeper grace and compassion for yourself. That's what I find, at least when I do that. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm in this now, but I've been in a similar or different situation before, and here I am. So,
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that evidence of like, no, I made it through. We'll be
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
We don't need to freak out.
all will be well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Anna. And then my last question, which is always my closer for each episode, is what is your favorite memory of home?
My favorite memory of home. Oh gosh, I have so many. I'm very blessed that home has been a very like sweet place for me. I don't know. I think my favorite, this kind of just tied back into the beginning of the podcast. Like I think my favorite memories of home have just been like surrounded by community in the home. I think home being a place where we can welcome people in and have good conversations, have parties, have dinners, like make the memories that like really matter in life, like that you really hold with you. When you're making them in the home, that's just like a really special thing. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Okay.
love that. And a beautiful closer to what almost what we started the episode with on that
I
talking point of
know.
community
Full
of it.
circle.
So
We're
we'll
so
call that
good
a
at this.
wrap. We
Perfect.
will call that a wrap. Thank you so much, Anna. Can you share with everyone where they can find you, where they can follow you, if they wanted to purchase any of your beautiful art?
Of course. Yes. My website is just my name. It's annanunez.com. I have an Instagram that's at Anna N Núñez, so it has the extra N in the middle. And yeah, if you want to collect my paintings, I have a selection of available originals on my website. I also have prints. I have prints at Anthropology now, which is really cool.
Wait, okay, hold on. Can we talk about that for a second? Because you mentioned you mentioned at the beginning, like having this poll specifically with like Anthropology and all that. And I had just, before we jumped on, because I was poking around on your website, I saw that your prints are now at Anthropology, which is so exciting.
Yes,
so congratulations.
they
So
are.
how does that feel? Because I think knowing that there was a poll specifically with like that store or that brand to now collaborate or work with them and have your art feature through them, like that's amazing. How does that feel?
It feels very surreal.
Yeah.
It feels very, very cool. It definitely felt like a cool full circle moment, like a cool like hug from God, an answer to prayer, like just a nice little milestone. I think it's funny, like Anthropology is such a household name. It got, I think people were like extra, like more excited for me than I like realized they would be. Because for me, I'm like, there's so many parts of my like art career that I'm proud of, and this is like one of them along the journey. But yeah, just like having it as a milestone felt really, really nice. It felt like a very cool full circle, like I'm doing it kind of moment, which is really great.
I'm so curious, did they, or like, because how did the specific print that you have featured with them get chosen? Did they request it? Did you get to choose which print you wanted with them?
No, I'm not working directly with Anthropology's team. It's actually, I work with a company called Artfully Walls.
Oh, okay.
And then Anthropology licenses their artwork. I don't know if they license all of their artwork, but they license artwork through Artfully Walls. So Artfully Walls was like my like middle person who kind of like facilitated the collaboration. So it was very nice. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations, because that certainly is a milestone. Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. Very thankful. Very cool.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for coming on, for sharing your story and all things your incredible creative process. So it was such a pleasure and joy.
It was very fun to share. Thank you for having me.